Let's have a little bit of fun here. We're going to make a reflection for the word reflection. We're going to use the reflect tool. We're going to give a little bit of a nudge, if you will, with the shearing tool, add a gradient, the little Gaussian blur, and use something called opacity on gradients, which is awesome to kind of put the whole thing together. First thing we have to do, obviously, is make a copy of the word reflection and flip it on its head. And there are a lot of ways we could do this. I could make a copy of the word reflection, right? I could come over here to this tool, which is our transform panel, and I could come over here and say flip vertical. Boom, you got it. Move it in place, it's all over. We want to use a tool that's designed to help us do this, and that is the reflect tool, which is located right here, bundled with the rotate tool. Select reflect. Let's assume that you don't have reflection selected, and you do have to have it selected to make this work. Do we have to go back to our selection tool? No. If you hold on the control key, command key on a Mac, and you click, you temporarily get the selection tool. You let go of that key, you're back into the reflect tool. What we do, hold the alt key down and click right about here, right on the edge. It's going to do two things. It's going to set where the reflection happens, and it's going to open up the reflect dialog box. We don't want a vertical, we want a horizontal. That's exactly what we want, and you notice it flipped it where I clicked. Don't need it at a different angle. That's all we have to do. Select copy, obviously, and there's our reflection, or at least the start. Now we can move it up a little bit, pick up the move tool, and I'll use my arrow key once, maybe just once or twice. That's all we really need. Now they're kind of connected together, if you will. Let's come back over to this one. Let's give it a little bit of a nudge, as I said, using something called the shear tool. Now, the shear tool's underneath the reflect tool, and it's bundled with the scale and the reshape tools. Let's go to shear. And of course, it's going to allow us to click right, say about here, holding the alt key down. I love that alt key feature with these tools. That sets the shear point, and this tells us where our angle is. Let's say we go about a -15. Let's see what that does for us. Not too much, that's enough, I like that. Click OK. What we need to do is move it over. And again, we can use our arrow keys. It should be fine. Should get there just perfect, and that's not too bad. So we got a little bit of an angle on it, that's cool. Next thing, I have to apply a gradient. You can't apply a gradient to text, so we are going to have to do something to that word. We're going to have to select it, and it still is a word. Go up the word type on the pull-down menu and go down to Create Outlines. Please make sure it's spelled correctly and you like the font before you do this. We've got it. It's now simply objects. What we're going to do is select it again, and we're going to go into our wonderful, marvelous gradient tool and choose a linear gradient. We're going to do this at a 90-degree angle. So it's going up and down. Actually, it's not too bad. I want the dark at the front, and I want it to go off to light. But here's our problem. We got a background that's not white. So it looks like the shadow is basically going from black to white. We want the shadow to blend into the color. This is a feature that I really love, the ability to apply transparency to a color in a gradient. So we're going to come back and select it. This is the color we want to get rid of. Click it, and there you go, opacity. We're going to take that all the way down to 0. As you can see, it works. Let's go ahead and select it again. We can choose now with this slider how much we want dark and how much we want light. Just depends on what kind of shadow you're looking for. We like that, but there's one more thing let's do before we call it a day. Select it again. Go up to the word effect on the pull-down menu and go down to Photoshop Effects, Blur Gaussian Blur. You say, Andy, you can't apply a Gaussian blur to a vector object. Yes, you can. Go to Gaussian Blur. We don't want a whole lot here. So we're going to go like maybe a 1.5, not really much more than that. 1.6 is fine. Click OK. And it gives it that slightly softer edge. So what did we do? Well, we used the reflection and shear tools to create the shadow. Then we used the gradient with the ability to change the opacity of the color to make it fade into the background, which is perfect. And then we used a little bit of a Gaussian blur, an actual Gaussian blur on a vector object to kind of finalize it. Reflection. Not too bad.